You were told that love would be enough, that if you just loved each other deeply enough, everything else would fall into place. So when the distance started creeping in, when the laughter faded, and when every conversation seemed to turn into some misunderstanding of some kind, you told yourself to love even harder, to be more patient, to give more grace, to not give up. But now here you are, exhausted, confused, questioning of love is really supposed to feel this uncertain, this disconnected, and this lonely. And here's the truth no one ever told you. Love is not the thing that saves and grows a relationship. Skills are. Love is a feeling. Beautiful, yes. Real, yes. Precious. But it cannot translate your emotions into words. It cannot create emotional safety when the conversation gets hard. And it cannot bridge the gap between two people living in two different emotional worlds. That's the work of skills. And today we're going to show you what that actually looks like. You've probably heard the phrase, love is all you need. It sounds beautiful, romantic, hopeful, love saves all. We've all heard it. And unfortunately, it's dangerously incomplete because love in all of itself does not grow or sustain a relationship. Skills do. Welcome to Love Shack Live, the podcast for people at a relationship crossroads. I'm Stacey Bartley, a relationship mentor, and I'm here with my partner, Tom, and our daughter, Brooke. Together, we teach the real-life tools that help love not just survive, but thrive. And the big idea that I want to share with you today is love is a feeling, but relationships are a practice. And if you don't have the right tools, love alone will not save your relationship. Today, we're breaking down the top 3 skills that every couple needs to have when the distance sets in, because it will. It's inevitable. And what happens when those skills are missing, we're going to talk about that too.
Hey, thank you for coming. Welcome to the Love Shack.
Let's talk about the most important skill. Skill number 1, the ability to translate your emotions into a language that first you understand. Here's the deal. When you don't have the skill, your emotions feel like ambushes. You react instead of respond. You get triggered by simple words or simple gestures, and you can't explain what you're feeling, so others can't understand you or even have the chance at meeting you where you are. A common experience without this skill is you get labeled as too much, you're too sensitive, you're controlling, you're impossible to please, and the worst part, you even begin to believe it yourself. You feel misunderstood not only by others, but also by yourself. I want to share a little story in each of these just so you can wrap your head around how these show up in our relationships. So this first one is about Kevin and Natalie, and Kevin would get cold and distant every time Natalie cried. He thought that she was manipulating him with emotion, and she thought he was just cold and heartless. But the truth was, Kevin had no idea how to translate his own discomfort into anything other than withdrawal. She would start to cry. He would feel uncomfortable, feel awkward, overwhelmed with emotions, and withdraw in order to deal with it all. And once they learned to name their core emotions and give each other some emotional headlines, basically things like, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm feeling, I actually have the ability to translate my experience into a language that I can use, things for them started to change. Natalie learned to say, I'm not trying to guilt you. I just feel scared. And Kevin learned to say, I'm overwhelmed, not detached. It took practice, but they moved from reaction into recognition and understanding between them. It all of a sudden started to make a lot of sense, especially when I add the caveat in the piece that Kevin and his mother had a terrible relationship while he was growing up. And his mother used to make him feel guilty because every time he wouldn't do what she wanted him to do, she would bust into tears. And Kevin grew wary of that, especially as he moved into adolescence. And so he had zero tolerance for the emotional stuff. He did feel like it was a manipulation. And when he could articulate and understand that those experiences are creating him showing up as he is today, well, then Natalie could go, Okay, that makes sense. And he didn't have to withdraw anymore. And she didn't have to treat him like the malicious, insensitive, heartless person that she was beginning to believe he was. So this is step one.
I just wanted to point out that in that story that Mom 2 just gave, that neither one of the partners had to change who they were fundamentally as a person. I think so often we think that in order for us to have a successful relationship, one of us has to coalesce or become exactly like the other person. None of them did that. Both of them remained exactly who they were. All they did was add a little bit of a bridge of an understanding between the two of them.
Because each of them independently of the other had the ability to do that thing.
Yeah.
That's where all really great relationship skills start. The ability to translate your internal experience that comes on like a tsunami in a one heartbeat kind of an experience. And if you don't have the ability to kind of sit with yourself and literally digest that down into something that starts to make sense to you, then sharing it and creating understanding for someone else, you're dead in the water. You can't move any further in the exchange of understanding, but also it will start to impact the connection between you. Like this is got to be step one, fundamental skill one, and we have a lot of processes to help us do that. It's important and it's work that only you as a human being can do. Nobody else can do this. How many times have you seen couples, Tom and Brooke, try and talk for their partner?
Often.
So many.
Right?
This is what they mean. I know, honey, I know what you're saying. I'll just say it for you.
Yes. Oh, they're not very in touch with their emotions. They don't know what's going on. So here, I'll do all the work and I'll take care of all the things while they're sitting over there going, I feel misunderstood. I feel dismissed. I feel dishonored. I guess I really am kind of stupid in this regard. I really don't know how to go there, but I'm also not ever given a chance to practice it. So there's no way I'm going to get better at it. They do have emotions. Every human being does. It's human. I just don't have a lot of practice and skill in knowing how to put them into words. If we don't have the ability as a human being, and this applies to all of us, if I don't have the ability as a human being to translate my thoughts and feelings into a language that makes sense to me that I can then share, well, then I'm going to act it out because those are the only two options I have. I either have the ability to understand them, share them, at least with myself, or I'm going to take them out on those around me that I love the most. There is no other option. Those are they when it comes to the understanding and management of emotions. So it's really important, as I tell many of my private clients, as well as my Better Love Club communities, like this is what we got to do. And this is where we need to begin. And yes, it's going to take a little practice, but not as much as you think. And it's so incredible when you start to hear the stories of, oh my gosh, I feel so much better and I'm creating success and just being able to share how I think and feel. I feel like a better human and I feel the relief of doing it.
I love how you say you need to turn your thoughts and feelings into a language that first you understand. And I think it's a little funny because since you're so comfortable doing that and you can always do it, I think for the people who never really know how they feel, they probably don't even know what you mean when you say that, you know? Because like us three know what it means and a lot of our clients know what it means, but I would say the newbies that come into our work, they're like, what? You often say it's a requirement that you have to be able to turn your thoughts and feelings into the language you first understand. And I think people are sometimes mystified for it, or they're like, oh, I love the way you phrase that, but I don't necessarily know how to do it. What I was going to say is that story you told beautifully explained it because it shared someone, the woman in your example, was comfortable because she cried and she knew how to access those words. The husband wasn't as comfortable. But you showed how by him going in and seeing, I'm time traveling back to when my mom used to guilt trip me. That's why I get so triggered when my wife cries. I think that's such a good example of how we do that, you know? Turning your thoughts and feelings into a language you understand isn't some mystifying language that nobody knows. It's simply just kind of doing your own detective work inside of yourself. It's not easy, it's simple, but it can also be kind of painful if you have to go and kind of dig around in those memories that shaped us. But we do sometimes need to go back to them to figure out why we're acting in the way that we're acting in the present moment.
Well, we can, but we don't need to in order to make forward progress. So we bump into this a lot too, because that's naturally, especially when I don't have a lot of experience kind of dissecting what it is I'm thinking and feeling right now. That is literally a neurological pathway in our brain that we train to go there first before acting out first. I have to go track back all of the emotions and feelings that I'm having, and I have to track it back to where it came from, just like the example in the story. And I'm saying, no, you don't. You absolutely do not, because yes, in this particular case, Kevin could, but I also want to just propose the idea in the same scenario. Kevin could learn to say, I'm noticing that when you cry, I shut down and I don't know what to do with that. It's not about you. It's about what happens for me when you do this. And I'm still digging on it. I'm still working it out. I don't understand it, but I can disclose to you that it's not you that I don't care about. It's because I get flooded with a lot of emotions. And even that piece would give us enough to move to the next moment in a better way, in a better place, as opposed to just withdrawing. And so you can be confused. That's the thing. But you need to be able to say, I'm confused and I don't understand what's going on here, but it's not about you, because I know it isn't. And if I don't have that understanding and I'm not practicing that internal experience of myself, all I know is I'm just feeling these emotions. It's so easy for me to blame you for the emotions that I'm feeling without realizing why I'm feeling what I'm feeling.
I was actually thinking about this the other day, how when we are creating something new together, you often say, I don't want to talk about finding the root of the problem, because that's kind of therapy speak and people can get intimidated by it. But I also would like to propose that we do it as a family. We do direct people to find the root of things, just in a different way, because in the skills that we teach and in like the emotional weightlifting and the power of the pause, the window of neutrality, all of those things, they are getting to the root of the problem, but just in a different way. It's like, and also in the example you showed of Kevin, it's kind of like if you look at our like psyche and our life as like a garden. So all of these flowers pop up and all of the flowers are different life experiences. And some of them are weeds if they're bad and painful, and some of them are beautiful and they're flowers. I feel like him discovering that the reason why he does that when someone cries in front of him, it's because it's triggering him to a negative experience he had with his parent. It's like clipping the weed right at the root. And so now when that happens, every time he can realize, oh, I know why I'm doing this.
I totally agree. I would say, remember, emotions come on all at once. We feel them all at once. There is no distinction in regards to the emotions that I'm feeling. That won't happen until I sit and try and understand what the feeling is. If a person dives into trauma therapy, for example, right? They're diving into the root cause, which is not bad work. Sometimes I need to go there. But for couples in particular, and people trying to do this co-creation thing, it's actually becoming very daunting, because I feel like there's so much that I need to understand before I can move forward that we risk running out of gas. And so you're spot on, Brooke. We do dig back, but as I'm digesting, we kind of do a top-down approach instead of a bottom-up. The top-down approach means I'm just going to worry about today. And as I digest this down and make sense of this, we know it's automatically going to lead to the next layer. And then little by little down the road, I go, oh my gosh, I think I know where this comes from. Instead of feeling like I've got to dig down into the root of it first to be able to do that in real time, it's just, we're probably not going to make it as a couple.
Well, it's not like looking out onto the plane of our relationship and seeing all the roots at one time. It's like you deal with one as it comes up organically in the work that you're doing, which I think is such a better and more manageable and more realistic way to do it. And it will stick because you're just focusing on one thing at a time rather than trying to clean up all the messes at the same time.
Yeah, when it just feels so deep and so heavy and so gut-wrenching that I kind of am falling apart and putting my life on hold to even go there. So no wonder we don't want to do that, right? That we're resistant and terrified to do that. And I'm just proposing the idea. It doesn't have to be like that. We can just talk about this, the understanding and what I'm thinking and feeling in real time. And you may not know where it comes from, but to be able to start that translation piece today in this moment and practice getting better at that, it's automatically going to take me to the same place. And it's a much more gentle, nurturing, empathetic way. And we don't have to put our life on hold as a human or as a collective, as a couple, until all of that work is done. It's just an easier way to do it, in my humble opinion.
Just to stack a little bit on what you and Brooke both said, I think this is why most people have this vision. Either it's what they've experienced or what they've heard. When people, we know, we've shared this often, most people wait. It's nobody's fault far too long. So there's all of this enormity. And like, come on, it's like in anything in life, like if we wait so long where it just thinks, oh my goodness, I am never going to be able to take this on. We often say it's a capacity issue. So most of us reach to a place where there's no capacity. And so we're constantly battling, we're kicking our own fanny because we should have started earlier and all this other stuff. So yeah, Stacey, I think this is why I always remind people, like, look, if what is holding you going forward is in your past, we'll take a look at it and work with it as we're moving. And sometimes based on what you've been through, you need to step into that and try to work through that. But by and large, that's not where we go, because that, there's other skilled people that do that kind of work.
You want to know what my favorite experience is that I love about my work? It's one of my favorites. I have many, but it's when somebody comes into our programs or into my office, right? And even on Zoom, you can see them like for the first session, they're kind of like dragging in with their head hung, and they're like, shit, I hope they don't bring up this and they don't bring up that. I mean, you just see it in their body language and everything. Like, okay, this is the moment where I get the shit kicked out of me. And I finally enrolled myself into the idea that I can take it, I can hack it. And then we do our first session and we start talking about this very first skill. And then they walk out going, gosh, I didn't know this could be so fun. And I was like, yes, it's doable. I feel hopeful, dare I say. And I'm like, okay, then you're feeling better when you walk out than when you walked in.
Definitely.
Wonderful.
There was a really powerful TikTok I watched a couple of days ago of a wife saying she had a video go viral a couple of months ago where her husband really hurt her feelings. And all of the people in the comments were saying, wow, you guys are probably headed for divorce. Some people were saying it pretty harshly. Other people were more comforting. And it was hard for her to hear it because she didn't want that to be the truth. She came back and she said, I kind of feel like I owe it to people to give an update that we actually are getting a divorce. And it was a classic example of just what you, Dad, said, where people wait too long. A lot of times we tell people don't wait too long, but we don't necessarily explain in a very easy to understand reason why that's bad. Here it is in 2 sentences. She said, we have to get a divorce because there are so many problems under our bridge that I simply can't let them go. So every single time we get into an argument, I go to the past and I can't stop doing that because there's too much there. I just thought that was powerful because in this skill Mom 2 is talking about, where you share where you're at and you can do it in a language that first you understand and then your partner can understand, that gives you an easy way to work through these problems as they come up and not let them pile up. Like Mom 2 always compares them to the stinky, dirty dishes, because if that pile of dishes gets too tall and too smelly and too gross, it's simply too big of a project to ever get through them and clean them. And that is what happened in this couple's relationship, where the mess was so big that it was simply impossible for them to clean it up, because you then have to be willing to let the past go. You have to be willing to move on to the next part of your relationship, or else you time travel back there every time something goes wrong. And that's not sustainable for either of you. So I just have never seen it laid out so clearly in real life like that. And I said, I got to talk about that on this podcast because I felt so sad for her. But you could also see she felt a little bit of relief in knowing that she wasn't going to have to clean up that dirty dishes because she couldn't,
There's a lot of things I'd like to say about that. The first one that comes to mind, I'm just going to touch on it, is her posting her fights on TikTok is a telltale sign of some of the senses of betrayal that are going on in their relationship.
Yeah.
So it had major problems from the get-go for her to even think that that was a really great idea, number one. And number two,
like you could tell she was swimming in self-doubt.
Yes. And that her kind of getting some external validation on social media was going to somehow absolve her and help her solve this problem.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say, and then we'll move on to skill number 2, is The pile of dishes is big for most of us before we get help because we are sick and tired of not being able to find a metaphoric fork and be able to move through this conversation in a good way. And then you got to scrub them, you got to soak them. And where do I begin? Do I start with the big ones or the little ones? And the really good news is with some skills, primarily with these primary skills we're giving you today, you just got to begin. It doesn't matter if it's a fork or a pan. They've all got to be dealt with. So let's start with the big ones and maybe get a little practice behind us, knowing that anything that we're addressing is taking us in the direction where we want to go. And if we feel like we have to take on the pile all at once, well, then you're right. I don't have the capacity to do that. I'm out. I'm absolutely out.
And I'm just going to say, it's funny. We all had something. I think, Brooke, in the show notes or some version of the 3 questions, because this is really good. A lot of people say, like, what do I need to know that is it worth, continuing to step in and seeing if we can create something different? Well, this is a really good place to start. And it's very clear. You're going to need to start here, and they're in order as well. And they've been with us for a long time since we've been doing this work. Stacey's expanded on them and deepened them. But if you just kind of look at this, and we need 3 S's. There's not a right or wrong way to answer them, but just honestly answer them for yourself.
So to create some clarity and context, what Tom is talking about is we have 3 questions that help you evaluate whether we have what it takes in order to step in and save this relationship and change the trajectory of it. And it was brought up from Tom because Brooke said the past has to be dealt with, right? You may not have any idea right now how the past can be let go, but all you need in order to move into a new direction is the willingness to give it a possibility. You may not know how to do that right now, but if you're willing to learn and you're willing to try, then you can explore whether
that would be a yes,
for
that
you.
question.
Yeah. So let's move on to 2, creating emotional safety for yourself and others. And there's a lot of talk about emotional safety.
We get a whole episode on this and many more.
We do. And there might be a few links to post in the episode as well. Emotional safety is key. So now that I have the ability to do a better job, not a perfect job, but being able to translate my thoughts and feelings into a language that I can actually articulate so that I can stop acting out or shutting down, the next skill is creating emotional safety. And that happens for yourself first, because if you don't have emotional safety, you're probably not going to show up or speak up, or you're still going to try and dominate the conversation when I start to feel unsafe. I want to control it. I want to push it. I want to drive the narrative, and I'm going to find myself doing those 2 things. So to know that I can be patient and I can slow down and stay present is an idea of what emotional safety within myself is. I'm going to be okay. I know how to navigate this. I know how to get myself to a place where I feel settled. So sometimes people feel like safe means I don't have any anxiety running, or my armpits aren't sweaty, or my stomach isn't flipping over. No, it's not that at all. You might still be feeling all of those things, but I can create a safe place, or shall we say a safe bubble for myself, knowing that however this conversation goes, I'm going to be okay. And that I'm going to create myself a safe place to say what it is I need to say.
So I'm having a thought, because I think safe, that's a big word that I think a lot of us go to in many different places. In the emotional realm, obviously it goes without saying, safe physically is always, there's a no-fly zone, has to be. But babe, what does safe feel like for many of your clients and members of our communities that we hear often when they uncover and discover this for themselves?
Well, and I'll share with you a story about a client here too. But safe is basically a place where I believe that I have the ability to navigate through this conversation, however it goes. Like, I'm going to create this safe, present, grounded place where I'm going to give myself permission to try and put a toe in the water, say what it is I need to say, ask for what it is I need. And I've got to feel safe enough in that place, even though my armpits are sweaty, to gift that to myself. But we can also learn how to create emotional safety for other people. And probably the simplest way for us to experience that in the real world is when somebody paves the way to make it safe for me to get on the dance floor, for example, or somebody paves the way for me to finally get vulnerable and say what it is I've been wanting to say because they're doing it. And all of a sudden I feel safe enough to go there. That's what we are talking about when we're saying create safety for others, is I have the working skills and understanding to not only create it for myself, but I understand how to create it for others by being that first person to get vulnerable, to get real, to say, I don't understand, or to take responsibility for the things that I'm doing and the messes that I've made. And so that helps create safety. In that skill, we're needing to learn how to give permission, which we're not very good at. As a human being, I don't want to have to take the time, which is the patience piece, in order to set the stage and be intentional and mindful. I want to just blurt it out, right? Or shut down and have you just know what it is I'm talking about. And so we are not in a great space in this time and age of history to create and feel safe. And so you notice the conversations that we're having. I'm not doing vulnerability. Oh no, I'm not going to be the first. I'm not going to tell you I love you first, even though that's what's true for me. Oh, hell no. I'm going to wait until you get brave enough to do it. And then I'm going to piggyback on that because we're wanting to make it safe. What if we were to flip that? And I'm going to tell you that I love you and then give you the chance to do the same because I can create safety for myself and that's going to create safety for you. And then what's possible here between the two of us will unfold. We get into this place where everybody's feeling unsafe and we don't know how to create more safety in our experience. So it's a big deal. Without feeling emotionally safe, you're not going to speak up. You're not going to say what you need and you're going to withhold or explode. Others don't feel safe sharing and being honest with you because conversations are so surface. We don't know how to go deeper. And I'll say that's the number one problem that people come into us for. They know they have a communication issue. Oh, we're talking, but we're not talking about anything that's going to take us anywhere. And we get frustrated with that because we don't understand that the emotional vulnerability is what we need to be talking about. The emotion of it all, not the logistics of what's happening. I'm waiting for you to do it and you're waiting for me to do it. And so then we just hang out on this little surface level stuff.
Also, would you say that the emotional safety can be sucked out of the situation by always stepping into manipulation or defensiveness?
The more impatient I am, the more controlling I am, or the more insecure I am, the more I'm going to say some stupid shit or maybe even be enticed to weaponize the vulnerable thing that you shared with me last week, last month, last year, right? To push it along, to control the narrative, to get me out of this uncomfortable situation. So without this skill, vulnerability feels exceptionally dangerous. So you either criticize vulnerability or you try and avoid it at all costs in order to protect yourself. And this creates a dynamic where you feel dismissed, misunderstood, invisible, maybe walked about over, talked over, or I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm ever going to tell you how I feel because you used it against me last time. And so those are senses of betrayal or the big conversations about trust that we often get lost in as well. We're talking about not feeling safe to risk again. And so we don't know how to rebuild trust because I don't know how to risk with you. I don't know how to be vulnerable with you. And therefore, I'm not going to trust you. Oh, hell no. This can create dynamics too, where you beg others to open up, but they're not because they don't know how to create that safety for themselves. Or you yourself are not making it safe, or a combo of both. And so we only engage in what's necessary. We're not really talking about what's truly being experienced as a human being within myself. And I have no ability to be in a space where I can understand what you're experiencing as well, which is going to naturally take us to the next skill that's important. But this emotional safety piece must be present, because if it's not emotionally safe, there's no way we're going to step into any form of vulnerability as a human being. And then I'm going to be acting it out again, either in shutting down or trying to push it along, some combo of that. So Michelle and Darren absolutely struggled with this. Emotionally safe was not something that they were familiar with. In fact, when I said it in our session, literally the two of them just sat there and stared at me like, that feels like so spot on, but I'd never even considered that was a problem before. I just presumed that everybody felt safe, even though they disclosed to each other now that they could actually articulate it and have the words to share it. They both confessed in a nanosecond, I don't feel emotionally safe to you. Hell no, I do not. And so Michelle kept saying Darren was emotionally unavailable, that he was out of touch with his emotions. And Darren kept saying that Michelle attacked regardless of what the topic was. I couldn't say anything. In fact, he even said, I can't even breathe without her jumping in and trying to correct it or tell me how it was wrong or how I could do it better. And in reality, neither one of them knew how to create emotional safety. So Michelle shared her needs like weapons. You're not doing this for me. You're not doing this for me. I need this and you won't give it to me. And I've begged and I've pleaded forever. And Darren responded with defensiveness and retreat. So after learning about how emotional safety works, they tried something different. Michelle paused before speaking, and she also got vulnerable about some of her own hurts and frustrations and messes, so that for maybe one of the first times in their whole relationship, Darren could see that Michelle also could see she's not perfect, that she didn't have all the answers. It was freeing for him to see her confess such a thing, because he was convinced that she had all the answers and she always did it right and she knew the way, and that he was never going to be good enough in any kind of a context or situation to even try to share what was going on for him, because it was always going to be criticized, shut down, corrected. And so he would just walk away. So Darren stayed at the table, we call it this time, instead of walking away. And they started using repair language like, I can try that again. That's a do-over. Hey, let me try again. I didn't come in so great there. Let me try again. That wasn't okay. Or reassuring language like, hey, I just want you to know that this isn't your fault that I'm feeling this way. This isn't about you, and I'm not trying to correct you. I'm just trying to share how I feel and where I went with this. And this shift allowed them to feel safe enough to tell the truth again. And it felt good personally because they were back in alignment or with integrity themselves, safe to share those things, safe to go there, safe to become more vulnerable. There's nothing more life-giving than just being able to lay things on the table. Like, here's the deal. We all say, I want to be who I truly am and be loved for it. But man, we're not very good because we don't feel safe in actually doing that, in sharing that, this be myself. Well, are you? Or are you kind of dancing around the surface, not really wanting to say what you want to say? And then we're frustrated that we don't get the result of being vulnerable in my relational experience, which is I feel deeply connected to you. That's the thing that we sacrifice, not wanting to be safe and vulnerable. So safety is huge. So we've got be able to translate your thoughts and feelings into a language that you can first understand. And then we've got the ability to create emotional safety for myself and for you, and that we know how to give that gift when we need to our partners and to ourselves, so that we can actually start saying what it is we need to say. The skill absolutely will, both of these in combo are life-changing. They're life-changing. The willingness to risk allows you to rebuild trust. That's how we do it, moment upon moment upon moment, where we make sure it's safe and we make sure to the very best of our ability that I'm willing to translate my thoughts and feelings into a language that I can share with you. So it's life-giving. Boundaries will start to make sense here too. And you'll start to see that boundaries are not designed to punish each other. They're actually a disclosure place of where I end and you begin, what belongs to me, what I can do, what I have the capacity to do or not. And this also takes us deeper into conversations around agreements and commitments. So many of them are made because I don't want to piss you off. I don't want to hurt your feelings. I'm trying to caretake you. It's not really what I want to do, but I'm not going to say that. So I'm going to just do this instead and agree to this and take care of that. And we don't realize that those nuanced choices are sacrificing the emotional safety within ourselves and the lack of clarity that we have within ourselves and each other. And so our relationships very much turn into a place of illusion and pretend instead of the realness of where we are and what we're thinking and feeling.
We talked about agreements and commitments yesterday in our roadmap call. Every time that we talk about this anywhere, but especially in the roadmap program, it brings up so much. And what I had to convey to our members was, this is an ever-evolving thing. I think so much around this particular part of the relationship journey is viewed so stagnant. It's a set it, forget it, and we don't ever mess with those again. We're good. Nothing could be further from the truth when we really think of it objectively. You may have agreed and committed to something long ago, and that isn't even in the realm of who you are and where you're at this point of the journey. So much of where we run into problems is because they're based on beliefs and situations that are so far outside of where we're at now. It doesn't even apply, but yet how do we address it? And so we take a very unique, but seems to be very life-giving approach to this. This is the most dynamic process we're ever going to step into with another human being. And our life is that way. And so is our special someone. So how the heck would it ever be fluid and dynamic if we didn't constantly revisit these and readjust them? And where are they not working? How can we readdress it, change it? I showed the people how much notes I wrote in the call yesterday. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, I've been living with this woman for 15 years and it's still dynamic. Hopefully it never stops being dynamic. So I just think this conversation is very unique, babe, how you approach it, how you teach it, how you mentor it. And it seems to be very, very life-giving to people that get their arms around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and thank you for that. I also want to say, without the ability to do number one, translate my thoughts and feelings into a language I can understand, and number two, create emotional safety for myself and others, you can start to see it cascades down into the problem of number three. And skill number three is expect and respect differences in our perception of the problem and in the disagreement, or in any experience we are having, because we are very different people. The problem with skill number three is, without me being able to do one and two, I need you to agree with me. I need you to see it eye to eye. I want and I seek and I desperately need the validation. So it creates conflict, and I'm not even aware that skill number three is a thing. What we see, our takeaways, what we experience, what's important to us, what's valuable to us is different. And yet we desperately try to make it the same. I desperately need you to agree that you saw or understood or picked up the same nuances from a conversation, from a movie, from a song, from a fight, right? From a piece of conflict about your mother, your mother-in-law, our children, our money. So all of these categories we expect that we're supposed to see eye to eye and be on the same page about. And our culture has so programmed us for that. Let's check, make sure that we're all on the same. We come from the same religion and the same race, and we want kids or we don't, or money. And we go down the list. What we really don't realize is that even on the surface, if it's the same, there's still a tremendous amount of difference in the nuance of it all.
Another TikTok story to share with you about this exact thing. There was a lady, it was very short. All she said was, I did not realize until I was 47 years old that most people do not see situations from many different perspectives. They only see it from theirs. She was shocked because she's an empathetic person who has a high emotional IQ. A lot of people can't. They only see them from theirs, and it's very hard for them to see it in any other way. And so she was operating from that belief, thinking that people were just cruel. And like, they saw all the other standpoints like she did, but they still chose to go with the worst one in her eyes. It kind of blew my mind because I knew that, but that's probably because of the work that we do. I'm aware that there are a lot of people who struggle to put themselves in other people's shoes or see it from another perspective. It was really interesting to hear her talk about it in that way because I could see why that blew her mind, and probably made it much easier now going forward, realizing that not every person is operating from her same emotional IQ, you know?
Well, and very often, even if we do understand all the perspectives, we're desperate for you to see mine, because we all want to be understood. We all want to be heard. We all want to seek that piece of validation. And so even though I understand that people commonly don't see many, many different perspectives, I still want you to understand mine.
It's like they're viewing it as like a win or a lose.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I lose unless you say, yep, you're right, I agree. You see it the exact right way.
Exactly. Well, and, we all have that experience and that thought when somebody is not saying what I'm saying, or their takeaways are different than mine, as though, man, I don't know how you got there, but I'll tell you which one's right. It's mine. It's mine. So says us all, right? Hence the problem where sometimes we're not willing to get off it long enough to understand another person's perspective or point of view. We are having very different experiences as human beings. And that's the beauty in it. Because if we could learn how to share them better and respect them more, it would expand our perspectives. It would open us up to many other thoughts, feelings, and abilities. But right now, we feel threatened by it.
By the way, for long-time listeners, you'll understand we're talking about the movie framework right now. But for people who don't know, Mom 2 explains it as we're all sitting in our own movie theater, watching the screen of our lives play in front of us. But what you have to realize is everyone is doing the same thing. Not everyone is in your movie theater. Everyone is in their own movie theater, watching their own movie on their own screen. So you just have to remember you're the only one that has access to all of your thoughts. It's just you. In order to share them with people, you have to speak them, which is skill number 1 that Mom 2 spoke about.
That's the funny thing about what you're saying is you would assume in our logic that there would be these things that are so insurmountable that we can't get through.
Yeah.
And I want to propose the idea that there are very few of those.
Okay.
There are fewer of those than there are pathways through. Sure, they're there. Things like maybe I can't continue because of infidelity. I don't have a willingness to let it go, but I understand why it happened. You want to be in a polyamorous relationship, and that is nothing I'm interested in, for example. So like those would be those insurmountable moments. But the majority of us in our relationships, especially a relationship that maybe I've been in for a while, have very few of those. And if we do bump into those, it's good for us to see them because we can start to see all the conflict that comes as a result of just not being clear that this is something I'm not willing to let go of. But at least we understand it. We're not fighting about something else or for something else. And I can understand why it's important to you, and you can understand why it is I'm not willing to go there. So it's a completely different experience than just battling about a lot of things that we're still not clear about. It must be all men. It must be all women. It must be relationships themselves. No, it's not that at all. It's this insurmountable thing where you need it and I can't embrace it. So now our pathway forward is clear, but it doesn't mean I don't love and care about you either. It just means our lifestyles are not going to mesh here and we're not good. Even though we love each other, we're not good to co-create life together.
Do you find that this framework that you teach is often the most like mind-blowing to people in your first sessions? It gives a lot of aha moments like, oh my gosh, their movie starts going because they can see how many times movies were different in their relationship. Do you find that just explaining this to them kind of sets the stage for them to be more understanding?
It just brings a lot of clarity because up to this point in time, I have been so convinced that the reason why you do what you do and the reason why you keep saying what you say is it's malicious. It's hurtful. It's unthinkable. And then you start to realize actually it's none of those things. And so it really helps to dissolve a lot of the things that I'm making up are true that are just simply not true. And once I realize they're not true, then I can show up in a better way. I'm a little more open to continue the conversation and explore what else I may not understand because I was so off base. It always takes me back to an experience that's been a while now, but thinking that Dad didn't give a shit about me because he told me he was going to come up when I was sick and then come up for hours. And in those 3 hours, even though he does a great job and had for the 10 years prior showing me that I do matter to him a lot, all of that experience went in the trash can inside of 3 hours. Right. And so that's how quickly it can happen that we can leap to these narratives and these assumptions about our partners because of this one moment and how easily we trash all the good up to that moment that has taken place.
And be 100% convinced that we are correct.
You are so spot on. And so understanding that is a human tendency that we make up a whole lot of shit that just simply isn't true in our narratives is very life-giving and freeing. And then we've got to give ourselves some grace because some people can struggle with the embarrassment of that. But and how silly and stupid you had been. And I would say this, not knowing or understanding something isn't stupid. Not embracing it when you do see it and step into learning more about it is what's stupid. Right? If we're going to go down the stupid hole, let's just call that out. Not knowing this and seeing some of the silliness and the inability to kind of like see it clearly makes you feel childlike and silly and selfish and stupid. However, if we could just realize none of that is true, you just didn't know what you didn't know.
You're just
now
human.
You know, and now you know what would be stupid is for you to not step in and run with that sucker. That would be foolish. That would be the stupid part.
Yeah, well, like you say often, what you just described, initially you didn't have the intel. If we gather the intel and choose not to act on it and learn it and deepen it and us ability to use it, well, then maybe we're not really want to improve.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would say in that case, though, I would say still you're not stupid. Maybe there's too much emotional stuff going on for you to deal with it at the moment. You could still know all of that and still not have the capacity to actually act on it, in the moment.
Mm-hmm. So be gentle here. As some of these things start to be uncovered, we can go, oh, why didn't I know this back then? Well, be grateful you're learning it now, because your whole life could have gone by and you would have never known it. Right. So without this skill, without this awareness, without this practice of the movie framework, you assume your partner's version of the story is the same as yours, and it never is, right? Instead, you start to anticipate it being different, and the curiosity helps me seek what it is that I may not be understanding. You take things exceptionally personal that really aren't meant to be personal. I get very defensive. I blame others, and I take on emotional burdens that just simply aren't mine because I don't know any better. So I either feel responsible for everything, or like the story I shared, inside of about 3 hours, I came to the conclusion that Tom just really didn't give a damn, right? So then I start showing up like that's my truth, and I'm going to act out that behavior just so you can see how those building blocks stack on itself. And the result is going to be constant conflict, chaos, and confusion between the two of us. And I need you to understand where I'm coming from. So I am going to fight to the death to get you to understand me and where I'm coming from, and to confess and profess that my experience is the valid one and yours needs to be thrown in the garbage can. And so it is a very common thing. It is something that we all probably are struggling with. I don't see a couple that comes in that isn't to some point of the relationship journey struggling with this. And I want you to see how all three of these skills dovetail into it. Right? So if I don't have the ability to translate my thoughts and feelings into a language that I can understand, I'm not going to feel safe anywhere. And I'm certainly not going to have the ability to listen to you. So therefore, I'm not going to have the ability to create emotional safety for myself. What's that? I'm just going to be acting out all over the place. And the more that I do that, the more I need you to validate my narrative and my experience. I need you to understand it, because I believe that if you do, then you'll understand me, which is true. So now we're competing, our narratives and our differences. We're competing for who's right and who's wrong in our narratives without realizing they're both right to us. They both feel like the truth. They both feel valid. And the more that we can't cross that bridge into the understanding part, the more we're going to fight about it. So that's hence why the more conflict, the more chaos, the more confusion. And so these three skills in and of themselves are life-changing. They absolutely will help us start on that road back to understanding, building connection, building a sense of, you get me, a groundedness where I can start to understand what the heck is going on here. So those are the top three that we start with. Everyone that comes into our world, you're going to start here one at a time. And then we have many more that will stack on top of that. But we really can't start stacking anything unless you can do these basic three.
This is not even arguable. The number one reason why people reach out to us is because they're not communicating. What I've always found fascinating is most, you always share, well, before we can even get to communication, you have to understand the skill that's not there, that's deficient, that's keeping you from even communicating,
yep,
right?
Yep, 100%.
And once you really can get your arms around that and really listen to this with some objectivity, think, oh my God. And people really say, oh my gosh, it's never been shared this way. The point is, everything we do is to have you be able to use it in your life. Why go through all this to not be able to do so? It's to be able to use it. Your relationship life is going to change. And we say great relationships is great life, So start at the root chakras in the emotional journey and relationship journey. We see it all the time around us with the people that we're blessed and grateful to work with.
Love is real. It matters, but it's not what saves or sustains your relationship. Skills are what make love safe, lasting, and fulfilling. And without them, we will default to our survival mode. We are going to act out. With them, we have the power to co-create something worth coming home to. So whether you're in a pause between partners, working to rekindle love again, or dipping a toe back into the dating pool, our commitment remains the same: to empower you with the learning the practice and the mastery of the skills necessary for thriving, long-lasting relationships that are, yes, full of the emotion of love. And if this is you and you're resonating and this is making sense to you, we invite you to join us inside the Better Love Club, wherever you are in your journey to better relationships. That is something that we are all about. And you can do that by going to thebetterloveclub.com and become a part of a community that's redefining what it means to love well from start to finish. So let's take a few minutes and give a shout out to our listeners from a little piece of fan mail, shall we? Bricky, what have you cooked up for us?
This question this week comes from Washington, Pennsylvania. How do you take the space and separation when you live together but you aren't married?
So what's required in order to create a place of space and separation is just a space that's deemed your own. And so if we're living together, what commonly happens is I go to a separate bedroom and you do too. And those are our safe places that we can come back to and create and build some of these skills that we've talked about here for ourselves. And then if we choose to and agree to, we can practice sharing them with each other and we can all live in the same home. And very often that's not as uncommon as we would think for lots of reasons. Parents do that for their children so that the children's lives aren't disrupted. They do that because paying for two places as we try and work through and figure this out is just not financially viable. What's important, and I'm just going to emphasize it again, is that each person has the ability to have a safe place to retreat to when I need it. Because I can't think or practice or learn when I'm in this heightened state of fight, flight, freeze. I can't get there as a human being. I'm going to deal with the thing that's front and center instead of be able to do some of the deep settling that I need to do so that I can learn how to show up better and implement some of the things that we've talked about on this podcast.
And would you say that this is very common for people that are using what Stacey just said, in-house separation? So it's what we work with people that are navigating this. Would you say, though, in this situation, we talk a lot about the baseline agreements in place, just so because you're oftentimes seeing and crossing paths much more than you would if one partner or spouse or whatever was out of the house, that so you can optimize this for both, right? Is that fair enough?
Fair enough. And I would say in the house, separation is probably not going to be viable if the two of you can't stand to look at each other and nobody can breathe without somebody firing off. You might even create more conflict and chaos if we try and set it up that way. So then we have to look at some other options. Like finding a safe friend or family member
right,
that I can stay with as we're kind of going through this, because we need more space and time apart in order to diffuse and settle down some of the intensity that you or both of us are feeling. So you have to kind of be deadly honest about what's possible here. If I get triggered by the mere sight of you and it sends me into orbit, we're not going to make a lot of progress in trying to do an in-home separation. So there has to be an acumen of being able to be in each other's sphere of influence for in-home separation to work, even though I might be doing it for all the best reasons. I was going to
say it could be a very logical, next option for you, but emotionally, it's just not possible at this point in time. Potentially a little later down the road, but how combustible it is, if we're going to use that metaphor, it's just the ignition is just within
nanoseconds.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's move to follow the fun, shall we? I'm calling this Love is All You Need Until It Isn't Pop Quiz. We've all been there, right? You loved them, but had no idea how to stop fighting. You loved them, but couldn't say what you needed to say without blowing up and losing your shit. You loved them, but still felt like strangers last night as we were lying side by side in our bed. So this is what love without skills is like, trying to build like IKEA furniture without instructions, just like heartbreak and hex wrenches everywhere, and you have no idea how to put it together. So here's your challenge. Name a moment where love wasn't enough and what skill we've talked about or touched on today would have helped you actually move forward.
That's good. Nice job.
By the way, Brookie, I thought this would be such a great idea for a bingo game. Like we could create like a little bingo card game and have the skills on there, and then we could throw out an idea and everybody goes, I know what skill, and they could put upper on it.
That's a good idea.
We could have, a little competition with it. Can you name them? Anyway, bingo. I hope that helps us start to see too, I can love you and still have all of these challenges, right? Which is just kind of highlighting the whole point of today's episode. I'd love to also hear what you came up with. Like, what skill do you see or series of skills would really help you take the next best step when you're finding yourself in these places?
I gotta share one quick story. When I was getting a divorce, my friend Sabrina came over into my living room and we were just hanging out talking. And I had a gallery wall, and one of them was "Love is all you need." And she said, "Would you please take that fucking picture down?"
I know, it feels so good and it's so romantic and it's just so not true. Love is a great place to start, but it's definitely not enough to see you through. So on that note, the song I've chosen today for our episode is "I'm Coming Home to You" by Morgan Luna. And I chose this because I just thought we can all have the ability to come home. We just don't know how to get there. And the lyrics say, "I'm coming home, not proud but true, with nothing to give but my soul to you, and a heart that is cracked but still beats for you. I'm coming home." And I just think we really do all have the ability to come home with an open heart and a willingness to learn and practice the skills that we need. It's available to us all. Even if we get to some of those places that Brookie mentioned in the podcast, where we see that there are clear things in our lifestyles that just are not able to be meshed, at least we now see it clearly, and it's not coming from a place of blame or maliciousness. It's coming from a place of clarity and understanding instead. And it doesn't mean I don't love you. And I'm going to say it again because that is very infrequently the case. There are so many ways to bridge the gap and to cross-pollinate the differences that we think are just so unsurmountable. There are usually only 2, 3, 5 that are. And so it's important that we gain the clarity that we need to make those very important discerning decisions. You can listen to this week's song along with our entire playlist by going to our website podcast page or searching it up on Spotify, Love Shack Live Playlist. And I guess the last thing I want to say to you, my listeners, thank you so much for being here in the Love Shack with us today. It's a privilege and an honor to do this work, to share these teachings and have these conversations with you. Thank you so much for listening in and helping us spread the word. And if by chance this conversation moved you, I encourage you or invite you to share it. And if by chance it's made a difference in your life, please consider giving us a review and letting us know about it. This is how our podcast grows. Remember, love isn't enough, but skills are. Learn them, practice them, and then live them. Bye-bye for now.
All right, it's time to leave the Love Shack. But before we part ways, we want you to know our door is always open and we'll leave the porch light on, ready to welcome you back whenever you need a dose of relationship wisdom. For more resources and tools, visit us at loveshacklive.com to dive deeper into the topics we've explored and find additional support for your relationship journey. Stay connected by subscribing to our podcast. Thank you for being part of our Love Shack Live community.